This video will show you how to replace the rear parking brake shoes on a Mitsubishi Lancer. This will be located behind your rear wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've completed that, you're going to remove all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts so we can get the wheel off of here. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a clear view of our brakes. We're going to have to remove our brake caliper. To do that, we have 2 bolts along the backside, right along here, to remove. Now for each of these 2 bolts, we're going to be using a 14mm. We're going to fully remove the first bolt to give it a quick inspection and start it back in a couple threads. Now that bolt will hold the caliper in place while we continue on to our next mounting bolt down along the bottom. To take hold of that caliper, we'll remove that mounting bolt up along the top and slide the caliper out of place. Now that we have the caliper off of there, take a quick peek at your brake pads. If it looks like they're worn at an angle or damaged in any way, you're going to want to replace them. These look fine, so I'm going to set it aside, putting no pressure on my flex hose. Let's get the brake rotor off of here. A quick inspection of that, of course, will set it aside. Now that we have the brake rotor out of the way, we have a clear view of our rear parking brake shoes. Now there is hardware holding these shoes in place. We're going to start at one of the anchor points. Now for this, you can see that I can use a flat blade screwdriver for the pin. I'm going to press this in. We're going to gently turn this approximately a quarter turn. If you are able to see the other end of the pin, you're going to find it has a flat blade that slides into the backing plate. I'll show you what it looks like in 1 second here. You may find you have to apply light pressure on this pin, pulling it outward as you continue on. Now this was rusted in place, we just had to work it out of position. Can start removing this. Now typically it's a good idea to replace the hardware. At minimum, you want to clean it and give it a thorough inspection. If it looks like anything's rotted and weak, you need to replace it. A little bit of rust is typically okay. Now with that piece of hardware out of there, we have movement from one of our parking brake shoes. The next thing we need to do is prepare to start removing our adjuster down along the bottom and the adjuster spring. Now for this, I'm going to use a screwdriver as a prying device. Make my way along this area, pressing that outer shoe away, removing the adjuster. Once I have the adjuster out of there, I can remove that spring as well. There's our adjuster. Pay attention to the orientation. We'll set that aside. Now it's time for the lower spring. This is typically just set into the rear shoes. If you take hold of it, move it around, it should want to slide out of the corresponding ports. There we are. Now still focusing on the rear shoe, we're going to continue on with the upper hardware. Now we have a spring that makes its way over the mounting tab in the center. We're going to have to dislodge that. Be extremely careful when doing so. Let's hang that shoe aside. We're going to remove the crossover bar. Just a quick inspection of that. You can see the orientation. Now there should also be a spring. I'm just going to look behind here. It's common for it to slide off and get stuck up along the top of the wheel bearing. That is something else that we're going to be reusing, so we just want to make sure we have that on there. Now we're looking along the back side of the rear shoe. This is where we can see our emergency brake lever. We have a pivot point, which is part of the shoe. we want to separate the lever from the shoe itself. Now there is some hardware holding this in place. You're going to find you have a small U-shaped clamp. This clamp is typically brought around this tab and then squeezed together. We're going to separate the two ears from each other so we can slide it out of position. Now that I've separated the ears, I can see that the clip is starting to spin a little bit, so I'm moving to using pliers. I'm going to squeeze along those two ears and the alignment tab, gently pressing. That's going to start bringing this up into a position that I can carefully use a pick or screwdriver to remove it as necessary. We have our gap. There we are. Now, as far as this clip is concerned, this is the most common thing to be rusted, rotted, or weak. This one looks fine, so I'm going to set it aside. Continuing on, you should find that you have a spring washer. Now, this just applies pressure in this area, but still leaves a little bit of gap so everything can move as necessary. It's just as important as that clip. Now we can separate the emergency brake arm from the emergency brake shoe. There's our shoe. We're going to pay attention to this area right here. When you go to grab your new pair of shoes, you want to make sure you have this same tab in this area on that shoe. Now it's time for the forward shoe. Up along the top, we have our spring. Now this spring actually hooks around the opposite direction than the other shoe. Something to pay attention to. Making our way to the anchor pin. Just turn that. There we are. Just as before, a thorough inspection. There they are, friend. We have the shoes out of place. Continuing on, I always like to remove this from the mounting point. We're just going to clean that up, give it a close inspection. Now, as for the rest of the backing plate, we're paying attention to all the raised areas. There's going to be 6 of them, 3 along either side. We need to make sure we clean up all these areas and, of course, all of our anchor points as well. Essentially, any places that the shoes touch against need to be cleaned. Now I've got that backing plate cleaned, I'm also going to make sure I clean this parking brake arm. Getting along the smooth sides, and of course we'll make sure we get inside of the circular port as well as possible. Everything needs to be able to move around. Now let's take some high temperature lubricant. We're going to lubricate the entire area along that parking brake arm. Now it's time for installation of our brand new parking brake shoes. We're going to start with the one that has the parking brake lever. Once you have your lever in place, continue on with your spring washer and then your horseshoe clamp. Just squeezing that on there. Now I can see that I'm completely bottomed out. I did use my pliers to press it on there as far as possible. Now what we need to do next is peen both of these ears in towards each other. For this, I'm just going to use my pliers. Now we'll take our high temperature lubricant. I'm going to go along this entire mounting pin here. And also all of the raised areas where our parking brake shoes sit up against. There's 3 along the rear and 3 in the same areas along the forward side of the backing plate. Before we go any further, you also want to make sure you clean and lubricate your adjuster. I've taken this apart, cleaned the threads, and applied anti-seize. This functions properly, it's not stuck in any way. Let's get this on here. Now it is common for this to move around and even potentially fall off. Just be aware of that. Now let's get our shoe in place. We're starting with the forward shoe. We have our hardware prepared. I've cleaned my pin and my spring. When we go to install this through the shoe, you can see the tip of the pin. It's a flat blade. That's going to slide into the backing plate. We'll give this a quarter twist. Then it's going to be perpendicular to this slot, and it should not pull out. Let's get that shoe in there now. Let's get our forward shoe in place. This is the one that does not have the parking brake stud on it. As we bring this over, it's time for that pin. When we bring the pin in, the end of the pin is going to be essentially side to side, and then we'll twist it as I mentioned. See if we can see in between there, line it up and press it in. We can use our flat blade screwdriver. Okay. Just take hold of that shoe. We're going to attempt to pull it out and away. The anchor pin is properly secured. Now it's time for our spring. As we start installing this, you may find that this moves. Of course, it does need to be in place before we can put the very end of the spring on there. Just keep that in mind as we continue on. Just bring this back into the proper positioning. We'll press that spring all the way up against it, holding it in place. Now we have our crossover bar with our spring. Now if you're looking at the bar along either side, you can tell that it has ears. Now it's time for the rearward shoe. For this, we're going to be starting down at the bottom. We have our adjuster, which is cleaned and lubricated, and our lower spring. Let's get that spring in place. The spring itself is going to fit in the lower port on each shoe. Let's get it in this one first. It's hanging down. Now it's time for our adjuster. You remember that I told you to keep it in the proper orientation. We have the threaded portion facing forward. Now we're just going to swing this other shoe right along the backside there. Slide it into that port. Now it's time for our crossover bar with its corresponding spring. We have it in the proper orientation. Now the shoe itself is going to fit into this slot, and then along this side for the rear. Let's continue on with our anchor pin. Okay, get that one on there. We'll just give it a wiggle, make sure it's secured. Now it's time for our last spring up along the top. We'll carefully use our pick as necessary here. Just make sure that that's perfectly leveled and up against that area. Double check the springs to make sure they're going around this as they need to. Wiggle the shoes around. They should be able to move, but definitely not pull away from the backing plate. If you happen to get any oily residue on your parking brake friction material, go ahead and clean that down. We'll also make sure we clean our wheel bearing hub mating surface. Now it's time for some copper anti-seize. Shouldn't need very much here, just a little bit all the way around. Spread it around as necessary. Now it's time for installation of the rear brake rotor. The first thing we'll do is have a look along the backside. You want to make sure you clean the mating surface where your wheel bearing hub is going to rest against. We'll make sure there's no miscellaneous debris on any of the three braking surfaces and continue on with our installation. We're going to take one of our lug nuts and we'll start it on here, preventing the rotor from falling off while we continue on. Now the next thing we have to do is focus on our small rubber plug. Go ahead and remove that. Just a quick inspection, we will be reusing it. Now this is an access port for your adjuster. As you remember, the adjuster is down along this area. We'll go ahead and spin this as necessary. Continuing on, we're using a flat blade screwdriver. We'll make our adjustment on that adjustment cog in one direction or the other. When we make our adjustment, we're trying to get it so our parking brake shoes are just barely touching up against the inside of our brake rotor on the drum surface. If it's too tight, you're going to have too much friction, things will overheat, expand, and potentially lock up. But if it's too loose, you're going to put on your parking brake and it won't hold. Let's go ahead and make an adjustment here. Once you hear a little bit of drag, you should be good. See, now at this point, I can hear slight drag coming from this area, but it's definitely not something that's slowing down the rotor. Let's continue on with our protective plug. Line it up, press it in. We have the rotor in place. It's time to reinstall the caliper with the brake pads. You can see that I have a gap in between my brake pads. That's where the rotor is going to slide in between. Slide this over the brake rotor. Continuing on, I have my 2 caliper bracket bolts. I've cleaned the threads and applied blue thread locker. We'll start in each of these mounting bolts, bottom them out. The torque for these will be 80 foot-pounds. Double check to make sure the caliper is properly secured and you have not twisted the flex hose in a way that might restrict brake fluid. Let's get this lug nut off of here. Let's get ready to install the rear wheel. We'll get the wheel in place. Start on all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts. Bottom them out. Get the wheel safely on the ground, and the torque for each of these will be 80 foot-pounds. Now that I've got the wheel back on the ground, I'm going to be torquing each one of my lug nuts in a crisscross manner to that 80 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay, friend, we finished the installation on one side of the vehicle. The process for one side is the exact same thing as the other. Now, once you've completed that, you're going to take your vehicle for a road test and test the functionality. Listen for any odd noises. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.